Okay. So, Boker Tov, and we are now on the third portion in the book of Bereshit, in the book of Genesis. The portion is Lech Lecha, chapter 12. So there was a request to have live transcript. Okay. You know what? The live transcript is kind of distracting, and it doesn't it doesn't necessarily work. So I'm not going to do it. And in the recording, if you watch the recording, you can make it have closed captioning. Okay. So I think that would work better. So, okay. So, as I said, we're chapter 12, verse 1 of Genesis, page 69 in Lev Shalem. The portion is Lech Lecha, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So just as a background, we have had 11 chapters in Genesis that have described for us a background leading up to what the focus of the rest of the Torah will be, which is namely the covenant that God establishes between Abraham and Sarah and their descendants. So that it is from this point on that the Torah focuses its attention on those people who are part of the covenant. The previous 11 chapters was a focus on humanity with a little tease about Noah and his family and how their descendants are Abraham and Sarah. But essentially, the story of the first 11 chapters of Genesis is about the creation of the world and the nature of humanity in general. And now chapter 12 through the rest of the Torah focuses on the Jewish family. And I say Jewish family broadly. There's no such thing as Judaism yet at this point or at any point in the Torah. Judaism is a development of the rabbis 2,000 years ago. What we really have here is the Israelite family and Israelite religion that will be developed in Exodus and Leviticus, etc. Okay, so though we might want to imagine that the Torah is a book for all people, no matter what religion they are, the way the Torah is written is for us. And I think that any objective reader and anybody reading the Torah, no matter what their religion, can't help but notice that the Torah from this point on, from page 69 in Eitz Chaim until the rest of the Torah, that you can't help but notice that the focus on Abraham, Sarah, and their descendants, and thus the Israelite family. So we learn, of course, broad religious lessons from the Torah. Other people, of course, learn broad religious lessons from the Torah. That is, the Torah is part of the Christian Bible. Parts of the Torah are part of the Quran. So there are lessons here, and the characters here are important in the religious traditions of the two other major Western religions. But it is clear just from a plain reading of the text that the focus here is on the Israelite family that later becomes the Jewish people. Okay, so I also want to spend a moment on this first sentence here on page 69, chapter 12, verse 1. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, God said to Abram. Remember, his name changes to Abraham later in this week's portion, and also Sarai becomes Sarah later in this week's portion. So God said to Abram, Lech Lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha. So it simply says in English translation, go forth, which essentially is what the phrase Lech Lecha implies, but I just want to mention that it's hard to translate literally what Lech Lecha means. So Lech, if it was just Lech, either just two dots next to each other, the A sound under the Lamed, or here the three dots, it's the command form of to go. So if it was just Lech, it would mean go. So, and it could have just said go. God said to Abraham, go from your land, from your homeland, from your father's house, El haaretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. So that would make sense if it just had one Lech. But since it has the second Lamed Kaf, which here is Lecha, Lech Lecha, it could either mean an emphasis on the length, verily go forth, or you verily go forth. You could say that because something is lost in a translation with just saying go forth. The Lech Lecha can also mean like you should with all of your being go. So all of you should go, or you should intentionally have full intention and sincerity in going forth. Okay, so what my problem with the translation is because of the Hebrew itself, and that the English translation "go forth" leaves out the problem with how to translate this. Okay, so I want to look below the line to see what the broader commentary says first about why God is even speaking to Abram, and what's the nature of this command to leave your homeland. And then also the next comment about the Lech Lecha itself. So I think there are some important spiritual ideas here that I just wanted to highlight. So we're below the line on 69. God, by giving Adam one command to follow, that is not to eat of a particular tree in the Garden of Eden, gave him the opportunity to be a moral, obedient person, right? So the idea that there is a command that God gave to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, that the giving of the command transforms humanity into a moral creature. It transforms human beings into moral creatures. The idea of either following the command or not following the command, and choice, and what it means to have a choice. Okay? The ultimate goal of God's creation was not a static world, but a world in which people, having free choice between good and bad, would freely choose good. Okay, so that was the idea behind according to this author and the editors here. The idea of giving Adam and Eve that command is to test them and see if they can pass the test and always do good. Following God's command would be doing good. Adam and his descendants, however, were not up to the challenge, right? So Adam and Eve disobeyed God. They were forced then to leave the Garden of Eden, and their descendants also then became corrupt people, which is why Noah was chosen to start over again, right? Just 10 generations later, God began again with a single righteous family. Noah had the advantage over Adam of having shown himself to be more righteous than his neighbors, but Noah and his descendants also disappointed God, who now changes the approach, right? So again, we know from Noah, after they left the ark, already there was an incident with Noah becoming drunk, and something happened with his sons. The Torah is intentionally cryptic about what happened there. Ham did something wrong, so there's Ham and his son Canaan who are punished for that. And then there's also the Tower of Babel, and God not liking what the people were doing there and building that tower to reach into the sky. And so, yes, so we see in the first 11 chapters the failure of humanity to live up to their moral to live up to their moral potential. So and so we go on in the commentary on 69 on the left there. Instead of asking one individual or one family to be good in isolation, God seeks to create a community, a people, descendants of a God-fearing couple, in the hope that the members of that community would sustain and reinforce each other. In that way, ordinary people would be capable of displaying extraordinary behavior. So the idea of God talking to Abraham and Sarah here is and creating a covenanted relationship with them is the idea of creating a community, not leaving it up to one particular person to be good, and maybe that have a trickle-down effect onto other people, but rather have create a community of people who would be buying into this moral system. Okay, so that's one thing that's happening here in chapter 12 that is different now from what came before. God's experiment to have people be good changes. It's like any good scientist. You have a hypothesis and then you test for it. And if it doesn't work, then you have to tweak the test until you get the results that fit the hypothesis. So God, having a hypothesis that humanity can be good, didn't work with Adam, didn't work with Noah. So trying again here, maybe we need more people to buy into being good. So the next paragraph, the new venture begins with Abram and Sarai, later to be known as Abraham and Sarah. We were told that Noah was righteous, at least in comparison with his contemporaries, but we're not told directly why this couple is a worthy choice, right? We're not told how Noah was righteous. We were told that he was, but we're not given, it's not fleshed out to explain exactly how Noah was righteous. The tradition, as usual, seeks to fill the gap, portraying Abraham as the first. It also doesn't say here why Abraham was chosen, right? So it's we assume he's righteous, but we don't know why. And he's also 75 years old when he's chosen. What happened in the first 75 years of Abraham's life? Why is he chosen now and not earlier? So there's tons of midrash about Abraham and his upbringing and his spiritual formation and his recognition of God's existence, right? So that it's not just what's happening here is God choosing Abraham and Sarah to be the parents of the Israelite people, but also that Abraham and Sarah are becoming the first monotheists. So that's really not fully developed here. I mean, God and Abraham engage in dialogue. So clearly, there is an awareness on Abraham's part that God exists, but the Midrash goes to great lengths to explain how Abraham came to understand that God exists. So the commentary, the tradition as usual, seeks to fill the gap, portraying Abraham as the first person to realize that the world is ruled by one God who demands righteous behavior of humanity. Abraham's descendants have been marked by a willingness to stand apart from conventional thinking, right? We go clearly, the Israelite people, Abraham and Sarah, going against the grain, where contemporary society has a multitude of gods with a small g. Abraham and Sarah have only one God with a capital G. And how that's difficult. It's difficult to be different. A midrash pictures Abraham coming across a palace with all of its windows illuminated and musing to himself, is it possible that there's no Lord of this palace? Right? Who's in charge here? Why are all the lights on? Why isn't somebody in control? At that moment, God appears and proclaims, I am the Lord of this palace. Okay, just one brief example of the metaphor that the Midrash uses for the world, that God is the Lord of this palace, being the world. Another Midrash portrays Abraham's father, Terach, as a manufacturer of idols. This is a famous one. One night, Abraham smashed all his father's idols. The next morning, his father, incensed, demanded to know who had destroyed his property. They attacked each other. Abraham told him, that's impossible, cried Terach. They are made of stone. There's no soul or spirit in them. Then why do you worship them? Abraham challenged him. Okay, so just the classic story of Abraham in his father's idol workshop. So two of many midrashim about who Abraham was, why God chose him, and how much of there's another classic midrash that Nimrod, the ruler of Haran, or even before that, Ur Kasdim. They traveled from Ur Kasdim to Haran. So in Ur Kasdim, Nimrod is the leader, the ruler, and hears about Abraham bucking the pagan trend, and says to Abraham, your God is so great, I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace and let's see then what happens to you. And God saves Abraham from the fiery furnace. Now, this image is an important one of Abraham in the fiery furnace, because on Hoshana Rabbah, on that day, the last intermediate day of the holiday of Sukkot, in which we circle the ark 7 times. One of them is about fire. And so there's a focus in alphabetical order. There's an Aleph through Taf listing of great miracles, depending on different topics for each one of those circlings. And one of the topics is fire, and there's a reference to Abraham being thrown into the furnace of fire. So it's not in the Torah, but it's in the Midrash. It's a famous Midrash, a popular Midrash, and therefore it enters into the liturgy as well. Right? And some other ideas, like the idea, why are there 2 versions of the 10 Commandments? One in Exodus, one in Deuteronomy. The words are a little bit different. We're told in one place to shamor the day of Shabbat, to guard, keep, watch, observe the day of Sabbath. And the other place says zachor, to remember the Sabbath. So the Lecha song, the first stanza, has the midrash in which God, and only God can do this, can say 2 words at the same time. So shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, with one utterance, was shamor v'zachor. So just 2 examples of many midrashim that we have that become so well known that they enter into the liturgy as well. Okay, so, and then the last paragraph of this commentary here is an important spiritual idea too. theological idea. The insistence that God is one is more than a mathematical statement. It's a prerequisite for a religion that demands righteousness, not merely obedience. It enables us to claim that there are fixed standards of right and wrong. In a world of many gods, the issue is not what does God demand of me, but which God can best reward and protect me in exchange for my loyalty. Right? The idea maybe there's a God of rain, maybe there's a God of the crops, maybe there's a God of I don't know, the trees, whatever it is. And so, you pray to one of those gods and you give sacrifices to one of them, and then your life is better. Then maybe you think that that's the one particular God that you're going to worship. So many gods doesn't necessarily lead to morality. One God does. Interesting theological argument. The revolutionary claim of monotheism is not only that one God alone exists, but that God summons us to freely choose what is good. Right? So this one God asks us to choose to be righteous. Okay? So now, the next comment is about the Lech, and we'll see some spiritual ideas about this too. So next to that number one there, the last line on page 69, God's first words to Abraham, translated as go forth, literally mean betake yourself. So it Lech Lecha means take up yourself and go. Okay, you could understand it that way. A midrash interprets this to mean go forth to find your authentic self, to learn who you are meant to be. So Lech Lecha could be translated as go to you. So literally go to you, understood in this midrash, this commentary from Mei HaShiloach, it's a psychological, spiritual quest that you're taking to find yourself. Okay, to go forth and find your authentic self, to learn who you are meant to be. So we have a number of spiritual journeys of people, not only in the Torah, but also in the Bible too. You have Moses with the burning bush, and you have, and so there's Abraham, you have Saul of Tarsus, disciple of Jesus on his journey, and then being called by God, or seeing having that spiritual transformation. There's Elijah, who escaped from the king of northern Israel to the desert, and was called by God in the desert. So there are a number of stories like this where people have to journey away from things in order to find out and be connected again with God, and to then be reoriented on that spiritual journey. So the commentary goes on, physically we leave our home first, then our neighborhood, and finally our country. Emotionally, however, leaving one's geographic country of origin is easier than leaving one's family. So this is a comment on the order of words here. It doesn't make sense to say leave your country, your homeland, and your father's house. Perhaps that reflects, how from easy to difficult, or maybe it's from difficult to easy. It might be easy to leave home, but it might be harder to leave our country. Right? You can imagine, in 1938, why did so many German Jews not leave, knowing that the writing was on the wall, and that anti-Semitic laws continued to be passed in Germany, and restrictions further becoming stricter, so that Jewish life becoming more and more difficult. Why is it that Jews just did not leave? Was it just because legally it was hard to do so, or was there an emotional attachment Germany or to this idea. No, that we are part of this German culture. We've been here for hundreds of years. How could this upstart Adolf Hitler change everything overnight like this? It won't happen. And there's some people, lahavdil, as they say, so we shouldn't compare our society in America to Nazi Germany. So lahavdil. But there's still a sense of questioning. Certain aspects of our democratic society are threatened, and this is not necessarily a political statement. You can understand it that way, but I'm not necessarily saying that. There is some people can interpret things that are happening, like the Supreme Court last June upending Roe v. Wade, and other element, about how to respect transgender identity in public school or not, et cetera, et cetera. All of this as being a threat to our liberties, and whether it's time to find another place to live. So I know people who are having the conversation, and I only know of one person who actually bought a home in Canada and is spending half a year in Canada in order to escape the chaos that is the American political landscape today. So how difficult is this to do? How aware of it? Like how much change has to happen in society in order for us to say enough is enough? I can't put up with it anymore. I have to leave. So, there's, for some Jewish people around the world, the rise of anti-Semitism, for example, in France, has led a huge number of French Jews to move to Israel. But now the question is, with the government that Netanyahu is going to form, is that also going to be a government in Israel in which liberties will be restricted to? And again, this borders on the political, but it's fascinating to me that someone who is on trial currently in Israel is elected prime minister. How is that allowed to happen? And one of the ideas behind the formation of this government is that a law will be passed to allow, even if he's convicted, to still remain prime minister. So when liberties like this and justice are threatened in this way, is Israel also a democratically safe place to live? Again, I'm sorry for Torah study becoming a political commentary, but these are questions that arise from the journey that Abraham and Sarah took. So, right, it seems just from a straightforward reading of Genesis that this is a call from God to them. But if we want to read it in a broader way and interpret it in other ways, what prompts people to get up and leave? What are the motivating factors that would cause someone to leave home and find prosperity or blessing someplace else? Is it because of college? Is it because of a job? Is it because of family dynamics? Is it because of issues that are in society in one place that might be easier someplace else, standard of living, whatever it is? Yes, Sumner. Unmute yourself. Yeah,
I guess perhaps the one difference is, at least I didn't notice, nothing was pressing on Abraham
right
to leave.
Right.
So he didn't have that kind of decision to make.
That's right. Well, see, the thing is, and that's part of the how the text is cryptic, is not only why does God choose Abraham here, but also why does Abraham choose to accept the mission? What's going on in Abraham's life that he's in a position to say, yes, I'll go. And the other thing is, he's 75 years old. Now, if we apply age, like if we, a 75-year-old today, and apply that to Abraham, Abraham lived to 180 or something like that. So the ages in the Torah are not exactly the same. Even at this point, before the first 11 chapters, people are living 900 years. So they're not living 900 years anymore from Abraham on, but still, he's living a lot longer than the average person. How many 75-year-olds do we know who are willing to leave their place where they've lived their whole life and venture forth in a whole new area, right? It's one thing for a 75-year-old to move where their children and grandchildren are, okay? At least for that reason, whether somebody, somebody's moving into, so many people in Leisure World are not just from the Washington area, they're from other parts of the country because this is where one of their children is living, and it just makes sense for them to be close to a child. So that's not quite the same thing as Abraham picking up and leaving everything behind, right? So, at 75, people could be leaving one place to be moving to where their family is, like my parents did last year, moving from Philadelphia to be with me. So they're not alone. They're leaving friends and family behind, but they're coming to be with family. But how many 75-year-olds are saying, you know what, we're going to move to Costa Rica now. We have nobody there, but we hear it's great for retirees and you can afford it. So it's rare that a 75-year-old will do that. Okay. So the last paragraph here below the line on page 70, for the first time, a journey is undertaken not as an act of exile, as in the case of Adam and Cain, or a quest for domination, the generation of Babel, that is the Tower of Babel, and then they were dispersed after that, but as a response to a divine imperative. All right, so this getting Aviva Zornberg, who's a great modern commentator and teacher of Torah, has a lot of psychological insights. And here, getting back to the roots here, it's because Abraham felt a calling from God to do this. There's one other thing I want to look at, and that is this idea in verse 3. There's a God, and so go, and so verse 2 says, I'll make you into a great nation, and I'll bless you, and I'll make your name great, and you'll be a blessing. Okay, so here's the incentive to move from your homeland to go to this land that I'm going to show you. You're going to be great. I always stumble over these words. No matter how many times I read these words, I always stumble over them because they're just the vowels there and that all the syllables just makes it hard to do. So I will bless all those who bless you. Lecha, and all those who curse you, I will curse. The nivrachu and kol mishpachot ha'adama, all the families of the earth will be blessed by you. So, okay, so this is the beautiful blessing for all time for Abraham and the subsequent generations, that Abraham and his family are going to be a blessing. And all those who bless them will be blessed as well. Okay, so the commentary makes an interesting point, and I'm not sure if I agree with it or not, if I think it's too parochial. And all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you. So we're on the bottom right on page 70. History has borne out the validity of Hirsch's comments. So Samson Raphael Hirsch, Germany, 1850s, Orthodox founder of the modern Orthodox denomination of Judaism, wrote an important commentary to the Torah. I will bless each nation in accordance with the respect it shows the Jewish spirit. Nations and empires that have treated the Jews well, from Muslim Spain to the United States, have flourished, owing in large measure to their openness to many peoples and to the specific contributions of their Jewish citizens. Nations that began by persecuting Jews out of their hatred for the Jewish moral code too often have gone on to bring destruction on themselves and their surroundings. So, to narrowly understand the rise and fall of empires on their treatment of the Jewish people, I don't know if that's such an accurate statement, right? The Jews have always been a minority. So to say that the Roman Empire fell because of how they treated the Jews, who are such an insignificant minority in the entirety of the Roman Empire, but at the same time, the Nazi Germany falling because of how it treated its Jews and also other minorities, that could be an argument. So in other words, the argument here is if how a country deals with its minorities is a lesson on the how the long-term health of a society as well. So how it treats its Jews is just one example of how it treats other minorities as well. And if it promotes anti-Semitism, even condones anti-Semitism, any society, then that society is doomed to fail. So is that true? Well, we have yet to see whether that will happen for China. Now, China, it's how it treats its Muslim minority. You could argue it should be the same thing on how it treats this argument about how it treats Jews. So forcing the Muslim minority in Western China into concentration camps and forcing them to give up their Muslim belief and become Chinese, will that lead to the downfall of China? I don't know. Certainly there's no sign of anything happening with China now, but North Korea and its treatment of its people, North Korea has been around for a while and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So, the argument can be made that societies will have longer term health if it treats all of its inhabitants fairly. That's a statement that can be made. But is it something that is followed today? I'm not so sure. Okay. This is really the issues I wanted to talk about with in Lecha today. It is because it is the beginning of the story of the Israelite Jewish people. It's seen as a spiritually important portion. The most important portion, one would argue, is the giving of the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai and the entire community's experience of God's revelation at Mount Sinai. That really is what the Torah is all about. But you can argue that the story begins right here, and that Mount Sinai wouldn't happen if there wasn't a people to be at Mount Sinai, and there wouldn't be a people until God chose Abraham and Sarah to be the parents of that people. So that's why this portion is so is so significant. Okay, any other questions or comments about this? All right, so I wish everybody well. Have a good rest of the day. And if you haven't voted yet, go vote. There's early voting in Maryland. I voted last Thursday on the first day, so make your voices heard. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.